The exiled Russian newspaper Novaya Gazeta says Alexei Navalny's body has been located in a hospital 50 kilometers from the remote penal colony where authorities say the opposition leader died after collapsing on Friday. At memorial vigils, police have arrested more than 400 people, according to rights groups in Russia. Many blame the Kremlin for the 47-year-old's death. Dmitry Ponyavin is following this story for us. Dmitry, what more do we know about how Navalny died exactly?
So you mentioned the Novaya Gazeta report. So we have to understand that at this stage, according to his relatives and allies and like any independent media organizations in Russia, there is no confirmed information about his whereabouts. But based on at least 2 or 3 sources, Novaya Gazeta located his body at a morgue at one of the hospitals at this regional center where the colony is. So the city is called Salehard. And so they, based on conversations with people in the city and people involved in investigations or in medical institutions, they released basically 2 major lines today. And one is that the case appears to have been taken over by some high-ranking officials from federal centers from Moscow. So they say that we can expect even more secrecy in the coming days about what's happening to the body and medical examinations. And the second account that they gave us is an account of one of the paramedics who is working in the city, and it's quite a small city. It's about 50,000 people. So especially in this small professional area, everyone knows each other. So he mentions an account by one of the people who worked on this case, and he says that apparently there were some bruises discovered on the body of Alexei Navalny, and the person who talked to that paramedic described them as bruises that usually happen after a person collapses suddenly and has convulsions, and people around him try to hold him. It also has some traces of CPR performed on the body. So these are basically the 2 major lines, the 2 latest updates that we have on the...
But convulsions connected with what you probably don't want to say, poisoning.
Well, that of course remains a space for speculation because, again, there is so much secrecy and we have to expect only more of it in the next hours and days. So.
That must be extremely frustrating for his supporters, for his family, for his team. What are they calling for?
Well, of course, they began the campaign calling on Russian authorities to release his body immediately yesterday when his mother came to the penal colony, and she was told that his body was taken for further medical examination. There is an online petition on one of the independent media websites in Russia that gathered more than 10,000 signatures calling on Russian authorities to release his body. But we have to understand, because Alexei Navalny and his supporters were declared extremist and a terrorist organization. So in this sense, that the Russian authorities have a huge leeway to explain domestic audience why they are holding this. You know, people basically don't need to know a lot of details about how terrorists and extremists die. That's what they call Navalny. So in this sense, they don't have any excuses, you know, for holding this information, because basically it's a bad person who died, and that's what they are trying to tell local domestic audience.
But when it comes to demonstrations and even vigils, they're being shut down.
Well, yeah, exactly. We should say that this morning on Sunday, probably the flow of people kind of calmed down a bit. There's probably not so many people bringing flowers to those makeshift memorials across the country, but they still do. And as we mentioned also before, on Friday and Saturday, more than 400 people were arrested. They are intimidated with further disciplinary actions, and some of them were given fines, some of them received short-term arrests, and some of them were even beaten up. And another thing is that we know is that these memorials, when people bring flowers, what happens is that basically boil down to people bringing flowers and unknown masked people destroying those memorials, putting, we saw some images, them into garbage bags and taking them away. But in the few hours, those memorials, they appear again, and people bring more flowers just after they disappear.
And who knows, that could keep growing. Dmitry Ponyavin, thank you very much for coming in and bringing us up to date on that story. Well, let's go over to the Munich Security Council, or Security Conference, rather, right now, where world leaders are gathered. Ekaterina Schulmann joins us from there. She's a political scientist from the Carnegie Eurasia Center. We heard their condemnation. Is there anything else the world leaders can do? Will there be action? Will they confront Putin over the death of Alexei Navalny?
The first impression, of course, was chilling. Many people present here at the Munich Security Council knew Alexei Navalny personally. He was a presence in the life of many for the last 15 years at least. So this initial shock is only natural. What further decisions will be made after more cold deliberation, I of course do not know, but I do think that at least his memory ought to be memorialized. At least it ought to be kept alive in perhaps the names of streets or public places in European capitals, and I have had suggestions coming to me from Russia that there ought to be a memorial at Charité, the hospital in Berlin, where he was convalescing after his initial poisoning, because unfortunately now we have reasons to suppose that he was poisoned a second time. As to the more practical political steps, of course, we all hope that this terrible event will further demonstrate to the world leaders what specific regime they have to deal with in the present-day Russia, how difficult, if not impossible, it is to come to any rational agreement with the people who think that murder is the solution to any political problem. Murder or imprisonment first and murder afterwards. How do you even start the conversation with this type of leadership?
What do you say to world leaders there who continue to do business with Russia, or believe that compromise or negotiation is needed with Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, say?
I understand that you can't expect politicians to be so horrified that they decide to change their policies to make some U-turn because of the moral condemnation that they're feeling. But the practical side of this whole history of political repression and political terror in Russia is that exactly how do you come to an agreement? What incentive does the present Russian leadership have to keep to any agreement that they may sign? If people overstep the bounds so habitually in the internal politics, and as we know, they also break agreements in foreign policy, so what common ground for cooperation or for coordination can there be? Deterrence is understandable. The balance of force can prevent even an aggressive power from stepping forward and from overstepping the bounds. But any other sort of agreement, pacification, understanding the demands and all that kind of thing, I don't think that is even practical any longer.
Navalny's team also blames Putin for his death. If that really is the case and it's so blatant, won't that give the opposition a rallying point?
So far it has only been a huge loss. Alexei Navalny has been a person who could talk to various social stratas. He had the talent of addressing different people. He was not just an idol of the urban youth. He could communicate with very diverse types of people. He had the gift of language, and he had his highly appealing personality. No one else can be put on the same level as him. So it can be a rallying point in a sense that we all now have this common loss, but so far it has only been a loss. His organization, the structures that he has been creating were operating on the force of his moral capital, of his political visibility, of his recognizable persona. Again, no one else has the same type of capital. But political leaders are not created by nature's miracles, they're created by social demand. And we know that demand for an alternative, for another type of future, for any sort of future that the present Russian regime is denying its people is huge. We have seen it even during those quasi-elections that are being held in Russia, when people who were not known yesterday became crystallization points for this demand that is unsatisfied. So long as there is a demand, there will be people who will step forward and become, if not leaders, then at least symbols, or as you say, rallying points.
Ekaterina Schulmann from the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.